Hello and welcome to a short video tutorial on demystifying BABoK V3 terminology. I'm Ellen, Principal Consultant and Trainer at Adaptive US. Many of you must have started going through BABoK V3 as you prepare for your examinations related to either CBAP, CCBA or ECBA. Now, what has happened over V2 to V3, a lot of new content has been added, which is pretty great. We have about 18 new techniques that has come in, a lot more explanation, many more perspectives that has come in BABoK. But at the same time, it also has added significant complexity in terms of the language used in the standard. Maybe one can argue that the standard has improved its language because it's better to use a more comprehensive language than using simpler language. So for example, one of the key terms that you encounter in BABoK V3 is business analysis information. Now, this typically in V2 we would have called it as requirements plus other information related to BABoK. But this time we are going to call this as primarily as BA information, which you may not hear so much in your work. That's the challenge that many of us face because the terminology used in BABoK isn't very close to what we use in our workplace. Now, obviously, if we are not using these terms in our workplace, we would find it difficult to understand these terms. So this video will help us to kind of demarcate or kind of mentally translate the language when we study BABoK. Coming down, let's look at the first term that we will encounter, and it's called approach. If you see BABoK V3, it hardly uses the term plan. It tends to use the term approach instead of the term plan, which probably we are more familiar. So we all know project plan, requirements management plan, but BABoK does not use the word plan. It mostly uses the word approach. So approach is nothing but a high level plan, but the term that you will encounter in BABoK would be approach, not plan. So whenever you hear the term approach, please mentally translate this to plan. The next term that we will come across is something called adaptive approach and predictive approach. In the common terminology, most of us would understand something called agile approach and waterfall approach. So this essentially means that whenever you hear the term adaptive approach, please note that it is nothing but what BABoK talks about is an iterative agile approach. Similarly, whenever we hear the term predictive approach, please mentally translate it to waterfall approach, which is basically a plan first, execute later kind of an approach. Then you will hear a lot of term called architecture, which is again a term extensively used in BABoK V3. Architecture is nothing but structure. Say for example, you may hear a term called requirements architecture. What does requirements architecture would mean? It means we structure the requirements as business requirements, as stakeholder requirements, as process requirements, and that's what we call it as architecture. So typically we will have a high level requirement, then a mid level requirement and a low level requirement, primarily developed from different perspectives for different stakeholders. So that's the term architecture. So whenever you hear the term architecture, simply translate this to structure. Then I think I talked about business analysis information. Remember, whenever you hear the word business analysis information, it essentially means requirements plus other requirements related artifacts such as your plan, could be your traceability metrics, and on any other document that you are interested in performing business analysis work. So that is what is BA information. And of course, BA information, large part would be requirements, but it would also include other information. Then comes the term, something called perspective, which is again another term that you will hear in BABoK V3 quite a lot. Perspective is something to look at from a particular viewpoint. So for example, business analysis may be performed in a BPR context, like suppose we are performing a BPR project, so BPR becomes a perspective, or we are conducting business analysis in agile environment, then agile becomes another perspective.